All right, everybody. Our next special guest and podcaster out here is doing some amazing things with the Women Leaders Rising Podcast. And we're honored to have Lav Chintapalli with us today here on International Podcast Day. Lav, how are you doing? How's everything rocking and rolling for you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's going well. So, just wrapping it up the day, and I get to be live on you with your show.
Now, where's home for you?
Austin, Texas.
We had to do an International Podcast Day when we're in the same city. You know what I mean?
Yes. That's usually how it goes, doesn't it?
Exactly. But let's talk about it. I mean, you've started an amazing podcast, doing some really great things. Kind of what led to the inspiration about launching your show and kind of what led up to it and what made you decide to do a podcast?
Right. I think podcast is usually in a sequence of things, right? You're like, hey, you've done this. And then you hear people telling you should do a podcast. And then I think too, because I'm in leadership development, right? I think there's always, especially for women, there was this thing, oh, I'm not ready. When will I be ready? I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Like, when do you know when the perfect time is, right? And sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and launch. And that's kind of what I did.
Well, and that's the biggest thing is God knows if we're busy, it's not like we have enough balls up in the air, other things that we're working through. And then I know that was a limiting thing for me. It's like, I got enough on my plate. I don't have time to birth another baby that I have got to hold.
Right.
What's been the biggest surprise so far since you launched with everything? What's been the thing that's kind of maybe one thing that you expected has worked out, another thing that's basically, oh my God, I didn't expect that?
Well, I think one of the things that kept me from launching is the tech. I was like, I don't want to figure out tech. Oh my God, there's too many things. It's just like, like just to launch one podcast, like one episode, for example, like people were like, oh, you can go to this booth and do it. And then you can hire these people to splice it and do all their intro and outro, and to me, that literally was stopping me.
Right. And
then you realize it's really not that hard. They're easy. I mean, I'm sure there are really complicated ways to do it, but there's also easier ways to do it. And I think we overwhelm ourselves with options and perfection and not take the first step.
Well, that's the thing. I think a confused mind is a no mind. I think we've all heard that say a million times out there. And if we can keep something simple, because it was the same way. I didn't want to start a podcast because I thought I didn't want to do all the editing. I didn't want to do all the tech. And luckily I found somebody to do it all for me that made my life a lot easier. Otherwise I wouldn't be where I'm at. And for most people, they wouldn't do that either. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit about the theme of your podcast, kind of what your focus is for our listeners out there that are watching this live or catching the replays? What's kind of your biggest focus and your demographic for your podcast?
Sure. So it's called Women Leaders Rising. So therefore it is for women professionals who want to create career success without the overwork or the overwhelm. Right. We're all trying to create success, but we want to find a balance, like sense of joy and sense of purpose as we go about our lives. So this is for them.
Do you often feel, or your guests feel, that they're having to kind of struggle with the pendulum of being professional or raising a family and finding a balance in life? And balance in everything. I think it would be not only just for men, but women as well in a variety of cases, right?
Yeah. So when the thing about my podcast is it's usually me narrating, right? So my own. So I don't have guests. So it's a solo thing where I talk about principles. Like I just started for the next 5 days. It's going to be the 5 secrets for it's like a success framework, right? So I'll be talking about one secret per day, and I'll be getting guests soon, but it's mostly me. But to answer your question, I think in my clients, in my coaching clients, I do see, right? I think we think of our lives as silos, like life, work, kids, self-care, like whatever thing, and it really is siloed. We're like one person. We're like, what's the thing? Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Right? You really can't escape. There is no escape from being you. So I think it's trying to understand, well, how do you bring all these pieces together and still kind of have a level of sanity?
Yeah, that's definitely, and it gotten much more difficult over the last few months as we've dealt with everything going on in the world out here. have you seen an impact with your clients, with you launching the podcast now, or attracting clients to your practice?
Well, it's relatively new, Scott, because it's a few weeks old. But so I think if you think of any venture, really, so there's this aspect of doing, and then there's this aspect of letting people know you're doing it. Right. So I think the first week I was still in the mode of, oh my God, I'm doing it, and let me just get comfortable with doing it. So I just started posting it around everywhere, and I've already got my first review, which is great, right? Somebody is like, oh, maybe I should talk about it more. Right. And it's always a double, like, do the work and you talk about the work. It seems like two different things.
Well, that's the thing. I think sometimes we feel like, okay, we're talking to the wall. Who's really listening, right?
Yeah. And people are listening, right? And to my podcast, as I said, it's really new. And yet there are people from all over the world listening. It's just not the US. And it's like, wow, the people, I guess what that shows to me is like people are craving. Like there's a niche for everything. So I always like, to me, like if whoever's listening, if you're ever on the edge of, should I start, should I not, like whatever, I think there's always, people are craving for information. And if you're that source, then yeah, for sure.
Do you wish you'd had started sooner?
Do I? No, I don't know. It's not a firm yes, because I think you always have to, somehow you yourself have to be in the right place and the right frame of mind to do it well, because I think I try to do it well, and that's part of my issue, so I don't know. I think now is a good time. Now is always a good time.
Right. Now, being here in Austin, and we've got a pretty decent podcasting group and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Have you tapped into the Austin Podcast Meetup group or any of the other podcasting groups out there?
I'm just starting to. I've been in podcast group I've been noodling on this concept since 2018. Okay. So I've interviewed podcasters who have podcasts like, hey, how do you do it, the process? And it was so complicated that I've never really dug into it, but I'm part of groups and I'm just starting to go, and it's amazing that Austin has such a good network of things. I haven't been to, I think we used to meet live as well, right? When we used to meet live.
Yeah, we had January and February meetups before we kind of got shut everything down. And actually had a big one January celebrating the third year anniversary of the group here. So there's about 80 people at it. So
yeah. See, of course I had to start once we shut down. Like, isn't that how it goes? It's like, right. Great, now I'm going to start it. We can't meet anymore.
Well, but look at two things here. And this is like, because you said you've got the next 5 days. Are you doing a daily podcast? Or are you kind of splitting it up? What's your plan of action for production?
The intention is daily. Yes. There are days I've missed just because I'm putting together a leadership summit for women, and that's taking up a lot of my time. So I've missed a few days, but I'm coming back to it.
Well, and that leads to the next point. You're using the podcast stuff marketing, but then you've got a leadership summit. When are you planning on doing that? And I'm sure the podcast is kind of helping you put that together too a little bit, huh?
Yeah, I think it's showing me aspects of it, because I know some for podcasts, people you have guests, right? So for example, for my summit, I'm having guests and doing the interviews is showing me how to do an interview on a podcast as well. And so I'm learning new things, and how hard it is to get commitment to people to follow through on commitments is another thing I'm learning. It's like, wow, it really actually takes a lot of work. And I have a newfound appreciation for all podcasters who have guests, because it's really a work unto itself, right? So, and then coming back to your question, the summit itself airs November 4th to November 6th. And it's summit.womeleadersrising.com if anybody's interested. So I think they all feed into each other, and I think that's the beauty of it. Yeah,
it totally is. Now, were you thinking back to admitting that you've been lurking for 2 years around the industry is a good term, lurking at everything. Now, obviously, you probably listen to a few podcasts. Is there somebody who's been a big inspiration, or somebody you're looking to model a little bit similar to what you're trying to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I actually listened to Russell Brunson's Marketing Secrets podcast, and my own podcast is sort of set up on his way. I'm emulating him, so to speak. But he has got obviously a much more natural style. He's like, hey, I'm on a vacation. It's like, oh, okay, and that's an episode.
Well, that's probably not the first round of episodes for him. And that's the big thing. We all have different groups, and everything big has small beginnings of figuring things out and finding your voice. And with what you've been doing for a while, though, so I think it'll come naturally to you a little bit more. You're just getting over the tech issues for the most part, huh?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope, but I think there's what the research that says it's episode 125 or so where you actually find your voice. And even though you've been speaking, like I give talks all the time, I give presentations, and yet I think every medium has its own voice, just like every social media platform has its own persona and own voice, right? Just like this, like it's a podcast, it's a completely different medium, and you have to find your own voice in there. So, I mean, if anything, I almost feel like this is a learning journey. This is a growth journey for everyone who kind of ventures into this.
Now, with travel being shut down, you said you speaking on things like that. Is this a big part of your marketing strategy and getting the word out and what you're doing and speaking more on podcasts here in the next year? Who knows, we'll probably never be back to true normal, I guess you could say,
Yeah, I would love to because I sit on a lot. I used to sit on a lot of panels and kind of do. So I would love to. I think that's definitely part of my marketing strategy. I'd love to be part of podcasts and just shoot the shit, so to speak.
There you go. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Shoot the breeze, shoot the shit. We're in Texas. Come on now. It's almost 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Now, but that brings me to the point here. I mean, I know that you and I are both fellow 2 Comic Club. We're going through that with actually a big chunk of everybody out here, and everybody's doing different amazing things. And that's what's so great is a lot of people are leveraging the podcast, sometimes doing weekly, sometimes doing daily, other times multiple week, doing a virtual summit, stuff like that. When you look back at one of the big, I guess you could say homework assignments for a lot of us, looking back our Dream 100, right? Figuring out who we wanted to have on, who kind of was I know you're not having any interviews on right now, but as far as reaching out and seeing things, maybe for speaking, like you said, asking people to be on your summit, who's kind of anything been a surprise with that?
I don't know if there's been a surprise. I think the surprise to me was I didn't know I could reach out to X and Y, right? And then you realize, oh wow, it's really I think as long as you frame it correctly, like why you're reaching out, and just not being spammy and saying, hey, this is a bigger goal. Like I'm trying to reach this, I'm trying to do this. And I think people are really receptive of it. So that was a surprise. It's like, wow, I can actually reach anybody.
Right. Are you, I think every platform, every social media channel's got its different voice. What's the one that resonates the most with your audience that you think will be utilizing more than the others?
I'm still figuring that out. Right. I think people, I know Facebook is a big thing, right? For the older, so I have 2 different demographics that I observe. So I think the older generation, I think they'll prefer Facebook a lot more. They're on this. But when I'm looking at the demographics of the podcast, it's actually, I'm surprised. It was a younger, when I say younger, like I'm aging myself, to me, they're young. 28 to 34 was the demographic that was listening to my podcast, which was surprising actually. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And obviously Instagram, like I have a little presence, but most of the people there it's a younger population. So.
That's true. Stuff like that. I would almost when you talk about your avatar, ideal listeners, I would think maybe somewhere on LinkedIn that you'd reach out to and market on there too. Have you thought about that?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I'm actually pretty active on LinkedIn. Maybe I'm the most active on LinkedIn. So yeah, it's just, I think you almost have to think of, it's not about where I'm active, is like where are the people active, right?
Exactly. Now with the virtual summit you're doing, are you doing both audio and video with your podcast and the summit as well too for you?
Sorry. Hey, Corey. I think this is happening. It's like, back-to-back things,
It's okay. He'll be back on here in a second. He just wrapped up with his own event. But are you doing just audio with the podcast, or are you doing audio and video both?
Oh, for my podcast? No, it's just audio.
Okay.
I think video would be requiring too much of, you know, putting your face on and everything. It would be like a little bit too much.
Wait a second now. Aren't those limiting beliefs things you're trying to help other people get over to?
No. Hey, you still have to. I don't want to show up in my PJs. We all have standards, you know.
Hey, here's the thing you got to realize. In 2020, it is the work mullet, okay? Visible on top, pajamas on the bottom. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And for me, especially, it's got to be pajamas on the bottom with all the, you know, with all the comfort food at home.
That's good stuff. They're good stuff. What when you start setting things up and start looking at things, what's your goal with your podcast through the end of the year and then into 2021? What are some things that you've been working on or planning besides the summit, post summit? What are you really kind of focused on for next year with your podcast?
For the podcast, I think it's really because now that I've started it, I'm committed to it. I want to keep. Sorry. This thing won't shut up. You know, it's a commitment to it, and now that I've seen people are watching it, and I think that's like it's a good feedback, right? It's a feedback loop sometimes we all need. So I really want to now really put an effort in making sure the episodes come in, providing value, and just to reach people out with this, and also use it as a medium to talk about my services, what I do, what's coming up, just all the fun things as well.
So let's talk about that. What are some of the your services that you're offering clients out there? What are you doing?
Sure. So I do obviously one-on-one coaching with clients men and women, like all over the world in the corporate sector. And the other thing is I offer group programs for women. So I currently have a program called Creating Career Success, which has people have had phenomenal success. They have had like a percent. They've gotten a 5% raise. After completing the program and gotten promotions and stuff. So that's really dear to my heart.
That's definitely, it pays for itself right there. And people come on, let's go.
Yeah. And some of these women, they're pretty high earning. And when you take, I think not even a 5%, I think she got a 13%, that lady. Wow. And so that's a pretty, nice chunk.
That is a sizable chunk. Definitely. That pays for a lot of podcast editing.
Yes, sure.
What would you say your biggest need is right now with your podcast? What are you looking for the most amount of help with?
I think to me, it's letting people know. That's always been my thing. Like I'm really good at doing the work. It's like letting people aware that it's there, and sort of how do people access it, and where do I tell? Right. I think that's always been,
getting the word out and marketing it. And I mean, I think that's a common problem for a lot of people. We're so good at the nuts and bolts of what we do. Yeah. It's that marketing aspect a lot of times we struggle with, because it's like, hey, we're used to doing businesses A, B, and C. Now we got to do D, E, and F. And what? Mm-hmm. I'm a counselor. I'm a executive coach. Now I have to be a marketer. You know what I mean? It's a difficult time. Or I'm in the media business now these days. What the heck is going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely learning a lot of things, right? It's just not the work. Once you're an entrepreneur, it's beyond the work. Work is like a tiny part of it, and I have to learn all these other circles.
Right.
Right. I also want to ask you a question.
Ask away.
How do you maintain momentum for an entire day of interviewing? It's like what?
3 cups of coffee. 3 cups of coffee, and it's just something that I just do. I love speaking. I mean, I've cranked out 625 episodes of my podcast in 3 years.
Wow.
We do live streams all the time. I got a coaching call with my students after I'm done tonight too.
Wow.
But that's the thing. I just have embraced the video side of things. Mm-hmm. It's also about changing diet. I have noticed a big difference. And this would be, you would think, counterproductive, but obviously I've cut out Red Bulls. It used to be a Red Bull breakfast. And banana with that. Now I've cut out the Red Bulls and got rid of red meat. It's helped my energy levels as well. So we try to do vegetables. I mean, I've had a little bit to nibble on today, not much, because it was a little bit of an earlier start and a late night. But I think the biggest thing is I get as much excitement as doing this and listening to everybody. So it's literally having a day to spend with 15 to 20. I want to say friends, because at this point we get a chance to hang out, and so people are like, hey, how's it going? I'd love to, I'd be glad to break bread with everybody on here, have a drink, or look forward to hanging out with everybody. So it's kind of just having conversations with 20 friends for the most part. So that's easier versus having to be like, okay, I don't want to talk to this person. We know those conversations go differently, right, Lav?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Maybe have you seen with your summit and everything that's going on with it, as you said inviting people out, is somebody that's been pretty easy to work with, or has it been difficulty in some cases getting people to get RSVP'd for your virtual summit?
I think it's a simple thing as a summit. You see the entire span of human nature. It's amazing. You're like, because this is just like a microcosm of human nature. And there are people who are so easy to work with, and they're so thorough. They're like on the spot. I give them a thing to do. It's like fill your bio, whatever. And they're like, bam, it's done. And like literally one of the guys that I reached out, I was like, dude, I just hit send. It's already filled. And he's like, I got to keep up my reputation, Lav, right? And then there's someone else who I've been working since September 4th, and I was supposed to interview him today, and he just canceled yesterday.
Ugh.
So, and then there are people who ghost you. This is like the bad side, like who don't respond, right. And it's just like, wow. And then there are people who are just so happy and enthusiastic and just love to be part of it, and and it's just a joy to connect with them. And so it's just like, it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. You do definitely find out who you enjoy working with, who's easy to work with, and you try to surround yourselves with those. And there's a few people that are always difficult. It is what it is. You just keep moving on and try to surround yourself with good people. But Lav, what's the best way for those that are listening and watching this to connect with you, to find more about your podcast and your services? The best way to connect, and even find more about the summit?
Sure, they can actually find me on social. I'm on, it's Lav Chintapalli, anywhere, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and my website is womeleadersrising.com. And the podcast, it's all available on all channels, Women Leaders Rising. So it's keeping it pretty simple.
Good stuff there. Well, Lav, thank you for coming on International Podcast Day and hanging out. I'll be reaching out with you and giving you some tips and tools to help you out, maybe make things a little bit easier for you with your stuff that you're working on. Is that all right?
Yeah, great, Scott. I would love that. Thanks for having me. It's
glad you're
here.
Yeah. Great to get a chance to meet, and we'll see you around. All right, Lav?
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, guys and gals, don't go anywhere. We've got our